me, Miss Shay, your traveling teach. I'm coming to you live from South Carolina. The city I'm in right now is called Columbia, and they have the world's largest fire hydrant, which you can see behind me. It's actually a sculpture. It's not a real fire hydrant. It was put here in 2001 by a local sculptor named Blue Sky. It is called the Busted Plug Plaza. Now, that seems like a really weird name for something like this, but the reason it's probably called that is because before there were fire hydrants, there were fire plugs. But we're going to talk about that in just a minute. This statue is over 40 feet tall. That's 12 meters, or if you've ever seen our little dog Truffles, from toe to the top of her head, 34 truffles high. It weighs over 675,000 pounds, or 306,175 kilograms. It took 14 months to erect it. So enough about the sculpture for now. I'm going to talk to you about the history of fire hydrants. Now you might think to yourself, why do I want to know the history of fire hydrants? And my question is to you, why do you not want to know? Because learning is awesome and you should soak up all the learning. So, firefighting has been around since way before fire hydrants. Obviously, we've had fire since ancient man, and so there's been ways of trying to put out fire for a really long time. Before we had fire hydrants, there were actually fire cauldrons used in China. Now, fire cauldrons in China were actually looked like giant cooking pots along the side, and they're filled with water so that you could use buckets to empty the water onto the fire. In America in colonial times, now colonial times is actually from 1492 to 1763, they used cisterns. A cistern is an underground tank to hold the water. So they were using that before. Fires were originally fought by the bucket system, meaning that you and your neighbors would get a bucket and you would fill it up with water, and then you would go and you would throw it on the fire. Over time, though, more and more people became available and they created the fire departments. And maybe we'll talk about the creation of the fire department another time. So after a while, they stopped using cisterns and they stopped using cauldrons in a way so that there was mainline underground. So underground, they would put all the pipes, just like we know it today, except that it was made of wood. So the pipes were originally made of wood and the water would go through underneath. And when there was a fire, they would tear up the cobblestones, dig into the ground, and put a hole into the main line to get the water to come out. They would use a plug, and then that plug, not a plug, oh my goodness, I've got plugs on the brain. They would use a pipe to help get the water out and pump it out, and then when they were finished, they would plug the hole, and that was why it was called a fire plug. And then they would fill in the hole for the next time that they needed it. Now, 3/4 of London burnt down in 1666. It was decided then that there needed to be new main lines, and they needed to have these pre-drilled holes and plugs around the ground. So the firefighters carried these portable sticks with them that they would put into the ground, and the plugs, instead of being under the ground, were on top. So all they needed to do was open the valve and put the pipe on, the stand pipe as it was called, so that the water could come out, and then they would be able to access it. I'm pretty sure after 3/4 of a city burned down like the size of London, it was probably time to figure out a new way to fight fires. It's thought that Frederick Graff Sr., who was a chief engineer in Louisville, Kentucky for their water department, is the first person to actually patent the fire hydrant as we kind of know it now. There's no proof, however, because the patent office burnt down from a fire in 1836, but they're pretty sure that in 1801, he put in the very first patent for a fire hydrant. Fire hydrants are actually, there's kind of two different kinds. There's a wet fire hydrant and a dry fire hydrant. So the wet fire hydrant is just like it sounds. Water is inside, constantly available. The dry fire hydrant is actually where there's a valve that is turned off, and then the water comes up and through when you turn the valve. That's actually what most of us have, and it's particularly popular wherever there is cold weather, because otherwise your pipes can freeze, all the water can freeze in the wet system, and then it's not available for use when there is actually a fire. Fire hydrants used to be made of wood, and then they became made of cast iron, and finally some are made of bronze. Most have some sort of paint inside as a sealer to keep the fire hydrant from rusting. Now again, that's really important. You don't want a lot of rust in your water and things like that. Even though it's not drinking water, you don't want to be putting rust all over everything or having it so that the system itself breaks down from rust. There are there's actually a coating system for fire hydrants. So if you look at the one behind me, it is silver, most likely because it is a sculpture. But you might have seen that some fire hydrants are red, or some fire hydrants are green, or blue, or orange. And the reason for that is because there's actually a coating system. If a fire hydrant lets out 500 gallons per minute, it's considered red. If it lets out 500 to 999 gallons per minute, they suggest you paint it orange. If it's 1,000 to 1,499 gallons of water per minute, that's green. And if it's 1,500 gallons per minute or more, they recommend you paint it blue. Now, these are all just suggestions. Only about half of the fire hydrants in America use this system. The other half are painted usually red or they're silver. But that's a good way to know. If you find yourself near a colored fire hydrant, particularly one that's blue or orange or green, and you're thinking, why isn't that fire hydrant red? That is probably why. They're using that fire hydrant system to show how many gallons per minute comes out of the fire hydrant. Now, why do I even care how many gallons per minute are coming out of my fire hydrant? All I want is water. Well, different fire types that have different space and different materials that are burning might need different amounts of water and different water pressure. So that's why they have this different system for how much water comes out of the fire hydrants. And if you want to know how much water would be needed to come out of a fire hydrant near your house, you need to figure out the volume of the inside of your house, and then you divide it by 3. And that will give you the gallons per minute needed. And then you can have a look at your house nearby and see if your fire hydrants are color coded, if ones near your house have enough gallons per minute for the amount of stuff that you have that you don't want to be on fire. So that's it from me, Miss Shay, the traveling teach, from the world's largest fire hydrant here in Columbia, South Carolina. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again soon. And remember, soak up all the learning.